host, Sami Kinnison, here with Angela Belford. And if you are listening to us live on the day of publication, happy election day. I almost said congratulations, which really, we all should get some congratulations for making it through this election season, this campaign cycle, all of the things. So, congratulations, way to make it here or to wherever it is you are when you're listening to this. And it's been some rocky times, I think. Wouldn't you say, Angela? Is that like a very light way to put it? Your face right now. You're like, rocky times indeed. Today, we actually wanted to talk about our favorite point that Sharon McMahon made at her book tour event. I know what you're thinking. People who've been listening through all the episodes, didn't you guys talk about Sharon's book tour event in your last episode? You're right, we did. If you want to go back and listen to that, we talk a lot about all of the different ways that she impacted us and inspired us. However, we saved the biggest point and the biggest moment that really impacted both of us because it deserves an entire episode. We wanted to share this one quote that really stuck with both of us just so beautifully. I can work with my enemies because they might have a change of heart at any moment. This was Septima Clark who said this, and Sharon shared it both at her book tour and it's part of the last part of her book. Septima Clark is considered one of the mothers of the civil rights movement. She taught and educated several of the key leaders and key people that we know very well, whose names are etched in stone: Rosa Parks. And she, throughout her entire life, maintained this belief that I will work with my enemies because at any moment they might have a change of heart. And we really wanted to talk about this message here on election day and in this time because how rare it is to take that view.
Absolutely. I think more in this day and time with the divisiveness we've seen over the last, 5 to 10 years, people, instead of having conversation and discourse and dialogue, it's like, you don't like the person I like, or you like this other person. I'm just going to excommunicate you. I can see how we got here because I have been at tables with people who are of a certain age, of a certain gender, of a certain nationality, who look a lot like me and they're older than me, and honestly, there's a and I'm not a big beat on patriarchy kind of person, but there's an element of, especially white men of a certain age, that are just have been accustomed to being able to just say, by golly, this is how it is. And they, some of them haven't realize that we have to have a little more flexible approach, that we have to allow people to, do the things that they want to do. I had a conversation even with a of a certain age white woman who, I had to say to her, "Oh, we don't say that anymore." "We don't?" And I said, "No. Well, what do we do now?" I'm like, "We let people live their lives without judgment." So I
Hmm.
understand the feeling of like, this person is intolerable and intolerant of me. Why should I give them the space and the kind? I'm only giving them back what they give to me. They're so full of their nationalist rhetoric that I can't even be in relationship with them. So I get it. And what we're asking you to do is do the hard thing.
And I think that, Angela and I have talked a lot about what is your goal for the relationship or for the conversation. And if we take the opposite view of Septima and we say, you know what, my enemies are gone and dead to me, and I don't want to have any relationship with them. My question is, what are you going to achieve with that? You might achieve some vindication, validation, but you don't have the opportunity to stay in a relationship with that person to change their mind. And I think that if your goal is persuasion, if your goal is to see change, you're going to have to take the harder road and stay in relationship with people who have different views than you, stay in relationship with people who see the world differently than you do. And I realized that that is really, really hard at times. And for some people, it may not be possible to be in relationship with everybody all the time. I accept that and acknowledge that.
Right, because I would say, what is your goal? My goal might be peace at the holidays. And if that's your goal, I totally feel you. The world is hard. It is a beat up place. And when I go home for the holidays with family members, I don't want to like just be talked at. I am going to hold you up, Sammy, as really have advanced. I don't want to say a paragon of virtue, but I do want to say that you have advanced skills in this area, and I'm curious if some of that is because you are so secure in your own beliefs, or if you've just prioritized the relationship that you can be in close proximity with people that are absolute complete opposites politically, religiously, like in a lot of different spaces. So, love for you to kind of give us some like really practical tips. Like, I don't think we should pontificate. We all know what this is like. We don't have to like expound on what it feels like to be in these relationships. But let's just get right to what are some of the ways. Number one, you said, what's the goal of the relationship? And if your goal is more than just peace, so you're gonna avoidance.
I think that for me, it starts with a authentic approach to curiosity. I don't approach curiosity as a manipulation tactic because some people do frame curiosity to be like, "Ah, yes, use curiosity as your in to convince or manipulate." But I genuinely want to understand what brought somebody to this point of view. What led them within their life? Because I really do believe that every single person has done and is doing the best that they can with the tools that they have, with the way that they were raised, with the circumstances that have affected them, with the people that they've surrounded themselves with. This is the best decision that they can make based on all of the available information that they have, that they've been presented with. And I want to understand what brought you to this point for 2 reasons. 1, I want to understand the human being, and I want to get to know them and be in relationship with them, which requires understanding how people along their journey have arrived here. And 2, if I understand how you got here, I can make a plan for how to get you to a different point if I'd like to try get you to a different point. I have opportunities to present, uh, challenges, forks in the road, a offering of a slightly different perspective, different things like that. But if I don't take the time to get to know them and their why, then I'm going to fall on deaf ears and it's going to become very defensive. I won't be let inside to potentially break down the defenses.
This is reminding me of something that happened to me in my 20s. And there was a certain faith based group that used to knock on your doors and say, "Hey, can I talk to you?" And this one week, this one person, she knocked on my door. My husband was out to lunch. I didn't feel like eating my lunch by myself, or he was out seeing a client. I didn't feel like eating my lunch by myself. So I'm like, sure, come in and talk to me. She started showing up. She figured out that if she showed up on Thursdays, that I would talk to her. And so about once a month, she would, maybe it wasn't even that often. Maybe it was quarterly. I have no idea. I don't actually know. It wasn't like, I mean, I couldn't even tell you the person's name at this point. But I would sit and talk and she would, we would talk about her faith. And I want, I was deeply curious of like, when did you come to this faith? I love faith stories. And she in 1973. And so that's the year I was born. And it came to be that my mother-in-law came to visit and I was with Barry at the client. And this lady knocks on the door and my mother-in-law was so upset that I was friends with this person. Like, "Oh my gosh, you can't let those people in your home." And I was like, it was hilarious actually because at that point, especially, I had a much deeper faith, and my faith experience was I would say I was a little more mature in my faith experience than my mother-in-law. Anyway, and I told her, I said, "I'm never going to convince that person that they should change their faith perspective to mine." I said, "But what I am going to do is I'm going to learn so much about that faith perspective that when in the future, when I have the opportunity to talk to somebody else that is not in that solid position, that is actually changed, then I will know so much more and be able to help them." And it has paid off dividends because I'm telling you, especially when you love hanging out with college kids who are trying to like wrestle with their faith, like I was able to then ask really good questions because I understood the perspective so much deeper. So while I'm not as good at this politically, I think from a faith perspective, I actually can be. This is a little easier skill set for me. So thank you. First is curiosity.
Well, and I think that to your point, you were very secure within your faith and that
Yep.
you're like, no, I feel very confident, rock solid with where I'm at. Not to highlight our messy middle, but I think you'd probably be comfortable with your political views have shifted over the
Yes.
past 5 to 20 years. Okay.
Yep.
20 years ago, you and today you have different political views.
Yep.
That I like your laugh. You're like, oh, yeah.
Well, I just laugh because I used to joke and say it was fine that my husband wasn't a citizen because he couldn't vote and he would vote wrong anyway, is what I used to say. So funny.
um, So I venture that these conversations politically are a little bit more rocky because it's not as you don't necessarily feel as secure. You haven't had the time and the reps in where you're at. However, I think that taking the perspective of curiosity, um, I might get proven wrong. And that's something that people don't like to accept in the
Mm.
conversations.
Yep.
That I could have a conversation with somebody who has a different political viewpoint than me, and I might be wrong. And I am okay with that fact, particularly because I try to notice in my life if there is an area that it's like, if you were presented with new evidence, would you change your mind? If my answer is, oh, no, of course not, I'm like, ooh, what's that about? You've got something else attached to that. That belief, is it pride? Is it identity? Is it something else? Is it judgment of other people that whatever it might be, that new evidence wouldn't change your mind? Let's dig in there. That's an indicator light for something that's not great. And so I think that that's something else that I am genuinely open to somebody convincing me differently. I I would love for somebody to have a different viewpoint than me, to have articulated it so well that I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I think you're right. That I'm gonna have to go explore that some more." I would love that.
Ooh, there's the key. There's the key. You didn't automatically say, "Oh, I was right. You were right. I'm wrong." You said, I'm gonna have to explore that some more."
Yeah,
There's some security in that,
there
right?
is.
Like, I think sometimes we get to binary thinking. "Oh, I'm gonna lose face. It's gonna feel like crap." You could be with unsafe people who are gonna never let you live it down that you were wrong. In which
Right.
case,
Or that you changed your mind.
or that you changed your mind. Yeah, absolutely. That's a whole thing. But I love that you're like, "Oh, I just now want to I'm gonna explore it some more." You're gonna get more information.
And to some people, this sounds like heresy to say that somebody of the other political party could convince you of their point of view.
Mm.
Like, that's heresy. How could you say that? I could say that because I am a human being who's taking in new facts all the time, and I am comfortable the fact that I'm going to change my political beliefs over time as I get new information. I want other people to be comfortable that they could change their political views at any point in time given new information. And by me showing up in that way, I also invite the norm of reciprocity that if I show up willing to change my political view when presented with new facts, I invite others and I give them the opportunity to do the same. But if I show up to the conversation saying, I know I know that I know that I know that I know that nothing they say will change my mind. Why would you expect the other person not to show up in the same way? Why would you expect the other person not to be that? It's super nuanced. It's super complicated. It's not easy. I just really want to clarify. There have been a number of conversations I have had, particularly with family, where we end at a point where I'm be like, okay, I think we're gonna have to agree to disagree on this one and come back later. And I think we're gonna have to acknowledge that we have two different viewpoints and neither of us are gonna convince each other. And the goal of this doesn't have to be to convince the other person. I've said those things out loud in the conversation that the goal doesn't have to be for us to convince the other person. Our goal is just trying to understand. And
Mm.
it lowers the temperature. Nobody's trying to, like, fight to the death and make sure that I make this change. Um, my father-in-law and I are on different sides of the political aisle, and it has been really entertaining the conversations that are we now have. They first started out and they were really heated and intense, and they now are light. We are both able to sort of poke fun at the other person's political party in a
I
way
would
that's
say he
not.
enjoys bantering with you on it.
Yes. Oh my gosh,
The stakes have reduced. Yeah.
my favorite challenge that I ever put on him was, "All right, so what happens one day off in the future when I run for political office in a party, in an election, not sorry, what happens one day when I run an election that's gonna show up on your ballot, even though we live in 2 different counties, and you are gonna have to decide between voting for your party or voting for your daughter-in-law?" And he goes, "Sammy, Sammy, Sammy, don't do this to me. You can't do this to me. Like, what are you doing?" Oh my gosh. I don't this is and I was like, "No, no, no. It's fine. You don't have to answer me right now. I'm not gonna have my feelings hurt over this hypothetical future. I get it. I've got 5, 10, 15 years to wear you down enough so that you'll vote for me." And he laughed because I said that to him that I've got time to wear you down where you'll be very comfortable voting for me. It was
Well,
so funny though. It was
Eh
banter.
well, and now it's become fun and banter because you worked through it. What I was gonna say is I have had some conversations where I will say to somebody, "You know what? I want to have this conversation with somebody that doesn't agree with me, that it feels safe to have the can we talk about this? And I'm not sure I know everything, and I don't know if you know everything, but can we have this conversation because I need practice having this conversation with somebody I love and care about so that out there I can have this more and it's almost like it's a little self-deprecating, but it almost like you're saying it's like, "Hey, we're going to sit down and play Monopoly." And then I'm playing chess and you're like, "We were going to play Monopoly or we're going to, whatever, pick another board game." We got to decide the rules of the game. You have Catan and there's the expansion pack and this expansion and this and this and this and this and the rules are all a little bit different, right? And
Mhm.
so I think setting those rules and almost that is a rule you've set, air quotes rule of like, we don't have to convince each other. Can we just talk about it? Which is a great seg. That's a great way to set up the conversation. Good job, Sammy.
And I think that to come back to how do I stay in relationship with my enemies so that I'm there because at any day they might have a change of heart. If you say this conversation, if I don't convince them to view it my way, then I'm out. That's one way to approach it, sure. Who's left in the room to convince this person if everybody leaves them? I One of the things that's so frustrating to me about people around my age and people around my political view is there is this like, no, you cut them off. We need to make sure that people feel punished and isolated. And they're not using these words, punished or isolated. But the implication is like, we don't give them airtime. We don't spend money at their businesses. We don't do any of this. We cut them off. It it doesn't work. It's not going to make the America that you want to make. If you're wanting to make a change, not being in relationship with somebody isn't the way to do it. And so, golly, I don't know that every single person has to be in relationship with every single person. I am sure there are people and there are families that are so it's too much. It's too toxic, it's too unhealthy and there's too much closeness between you and that other person that you may not be the person who gets to say, um, "Have you considered another political view?" And somebody's got to. And so there are times where I think about I have less stake in the game to be this person for somebody so that somebody else that it's a lot closer to home and it's a lot harder to have these conversations, maybe they don't have to. And so you don't have to be this for everyone. You don't have to be the person in every room, but are you in some rooms with people who have different viewpoints than you? Because who knows? Maybe you view it as a opposition research. If I can really understand the other side, I can more adequately argue against them. I can more adequately find the holes in the armor. Angela, you were talking about you've got some friends who say, no, let's go for the biggest, most secured entrance. Yeah.
I do. So I have continued. So started as a homeless advocate 7 years ago, worked locally, worked my way into the housing authority, lost that job, continued to do the work nationally. And I had the opportunity earlier this year to be in DC and was visiting with a senator who, quite frankly, recognized me. You could see that face. Like they recognized me. I'm like, hi, yes, I live in Fayetteville. I could point out to him. We used to go to the same church. I didn't. But I know him. I've met with him a couple of times, so I know that he is very passionate about veterans affairs and anything that comes in front of him about veterans, he is a huge veterans advocate. And so in this room that I was in, there were people that were kind of informally designated to talk about public housing reform and there was people informally to talk about um voucher reform for housing vouchers. And I was kind of informally the person to talk about homelessness. And so I said, I believe that there should be universal housing choice vouchers. Oh, universal. Oh, can't handle it. He's on the opposite side of where I am right now. And so, oh, he just couldn't. No, we can't talk about universal. I was like, okay. What about if every veteran that qualifies financially for a voucher and they're at risk or currently homeless, could you support something that made sure that every veteran that qualified would get a voucher, a housing voucher? Because in this rental market with these housing prices, they just can't compete. Yes. Well, guess what I just pitched to him? Universal veteran housing vouchers. But he hates the word universal. It is a lightning rod for him. And I said, "Well, he," and then somebody else was talking about something else and he said, "Well, are there any programs that are working that we could like do?" Yes. What about homeless youth that are kids aging out of the foster care system? So these are not kids that they don't have any boots to pull themselves up by the bootstraps by. They are literally a ward of the state. What if we made their anybody that qualified, we gave those kids about, oh, that makes so much sense. We keep them out of jail. We keep them, oh, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, perfect. Well, I've just pitched two different segments. Well, so I went through and as I'm working on my next policy advocacy thing, I'm like, oh, let's carve out some of these communities that are very vulnerable and let's expand housing vouchers for the most vulnerable in our community. Oh, we could get excited about this. And I identified 5 communities. And they're like, ah! I mean, I got yelled at that I wasn't asking for enough. And who cares if they don't like the word universal? And they just need to get over themselves. And I'm just like, well, here's the thing. If we have vouchers for all the people that qualify in these 5 areas, we free up the mainstream vouchers for everybody else. It actually helps the system because it has expanded them. Anyway, and I'm telling you, I get as much flack from the people that are on my side because I continue to look for the chinks in the armor and the weakness in the wall and go after that. And I get yelled at for just accepting incremental change. And I take a beating on both sides, and it's really hard. It's
Really
really, really
hard.
hard.
And it's discouraging for people who are wanting to make a difference, who continue to get beat down from all sides. And it's something that we're we're not going to make lasting change. We're going to burn people out. We're going to exhaust our passionate people and advocates who are there to help others because we keep yelling, someone's yelling at them, you're not doing enough. You know what? I am frankly really tired of people telling me I'm not doing enough politically. Okay.
Yep.
I promise you, I am doing what I can with what I have. And if you ask me for more, I'm pretty darn close to throwing my hands up and saying, you know what? You get nothing. If
Yeah.
what I have to offer is not enough, then you get
Yep.
nothing. And that is the
And
risk
then
that I
they
don't.
stand around and go, "How come nobody will volunteer with us? How come nobody wants to help us?" I'm so sorry. I'm so sick of this. Like, I'm seeing this across nonprofits, not just politically, faith-based, all sorts of things. And it's like the reason why is because you will not accept what they offer, and it's never enough.
It's never enough. We're here to tell you, counterculturally, what you have to bring to the table is enough.
Sorry.
You are
I went off.
enough.
Yes, we
No,
went off
but
on a
you are
tangent.
enough. You are
Yeah.
enough to offer what it is you have, to make a difference in the ways that you can, to volunteer, not volunteer, have the conversation, don't have the conversation, to be in relationship, to not be in relationship. Whatever it is that you're able to bring to the table is enough. Our point of our conversation today is to encourage you and some people to admonish you that being in relationship with people who have a different point of view than you is not a bad thing. Frankly, it's actually the only way forward. It is the only productive way forward. Well, let me clarify that.
Well, and to wrap up, I do want to say that some of the things that you've said when I think about why are people like this? Like, why are people afraid to have the conversation? Why are people so hell bent on that their way is the right way? I think we have to, in your chase for curiosity, look at the identity because for your father in law, the very thought of selecting something that has a different letter beside it, like, jeopardizes who he says he is, right? Like, oh, who am I if I am not a yellow dog Democrat or whatever it was they used to say, Lyndon B. Johnson, And like if I'm not this political party, then who am I? And I think in right now we've had our culture has had a crisis of faith. So we have people that have left faith communities and they have translated that what they were getting from the faith communities, which was community relationships, and they have transferred that over to their political party, and political parties were never meant to be the stand-in for family, for faith communities, for relationships. It is simply, I love how people say that a the president is a little bit like public transportation. You're never going to get you front door to front door, right? In public transportation, you're going to have to walk to the bus stop and you're going to get as close as you can and you're going to walk there. And so that is a little bit how it is. I think when you're looking at your political identity, you got to figure out who's going to get you closest, right? To what your destination is. And is the person you're choosing, is it getting you farther away from your destination or closer to your destination? It is not designed to be your identity.
Right. Man, there's so much going on in the world and there's so many things happening. And we hope that this is just a little bit of a bright spot and encouragement and maybe a different tone and a different message than what you're getting from some other people and other people within your community or on your social media followings or whatever. We love you and we're here to encourage you. And we think that as hard as it might be to say, being in relationship with your enemies is kind of freaking awesome. Okay. It's not necessarily always feels awesome, but it is a freaking awesome skill to be able to have and to maintain and to exercise. And so we hope that you will take this encouragement and, you know what? Send us your stories. You can send it to us anonymously if you'd like. You can tell us your story, the names, whatever it is. We would love to hear from you and maybe even get a chance to share some of your wins and losses, some of the ways that you've fallen on your face and learned a lesson, because sometimes we learn more from our failures than we do from our successes. And also hear the wins and hear the great ways that you guys are in relationship with other people. We hope you guys find community, spend some time today with people that you love, send text messages of encouragement to everybody across the aisle, all in the full spectrum. And for now, we hope you guys go be freaking awesome.